Welcome to the Empowered to Connect podcast, where we come together to discuss a healing-centered approach to engagement and well-being for ourselves, our families, and our communities. I'm JD Wilson, and I am your host. And today on the show, we've got Faris and Becca McKay from ETC with us to talk about our next connecting practice, which is balancing nurture and structure. Now, this is something that you're going to find weaves in and out of almost every connecting practice we're going to talk about. It's one of the core components that we would say undergirds all of, whether you want to call it connected parenting, attachment-based parenting, gentle parenting, conscious parenting, whatever. The balance of nurture and structure is super, super important, and Jesse and Becca are with us to tell us why. So you don't want to miss that. Also, as we continue going on through this series, just know we're all going to need it this summer. We're all going to need different reminders of what we need to do as parents. This is one that probably in the summertime will ring true as much or more than any of the others, because it is a hard balance to strike. So pay special attention, get a notebook, get some quiet, and get ready to listen to Becca McKay, Jesse Faris, and myself talking about balancing nurture and structure. I want to remind you that our friends at Ryan and Rose have made a special discount code available for listeners of the ETC podcast. It's an unbelievable discount. It's 20% off of your total order at Ryan and Rose. It couldn't have come at a better time because their June collection has just launched. There's all kinds of new products and new colorways and all that all available on the website at ryanandrose.co. Ryan and Rose, I mean, you know, if you've been listening for a while, they provide families across the globe with cute, safe, and functional products, redefining the baby industry with guidance from the Lord. Now, the thing is, it is not just baby products. It's not just family products. There are things on there for everybody. So whether it's a universal bottle holder or you're buying pasties and passy clips for your kids or for a baby shower coming up, you're going to find safe, functional, cute things for your kids at Ryan and Rose. And they have been big supporters, big fans of our program for a long time. And so they want to make a special discount available for ETC listeners. And it is ETC20, code ETC20 at checkout to get 20% off of your total order at Ryan and Rose and support a company that is also supporting a bunch of incredible work happening across the globe. So head to ryanandrose.co for more info or to buy stuff from their new June collection. Well, we're here today with Jesse Faris and Becca McKay, both from ETC, and we're going to talk about another one of our connecting practices today. One that, and look, I just will admit up front, I'm probably going to say this about all of them because they all genuinely are important, but one of the more foundational principles that we're going to talk about in kind of this whole category, and whether you talk about gentle parenting or attachment-based parenting or connected parenting or anything in this family of parenting we talk about, the principle we're talking about today is one of the main things you're going to hear talked about, and that's balancing nurture and structure. And so we're going to talk about that today and just the ins and outs of it. And so we've got Becca and Jesse with us. And so guys, and Becca, why don't we start with you? Will you kind of help set this up for us, the idea of the importance of balancing nurture and structure as you parent and give care for kids?
Absolutely. So balancing nurture and structure is, like you said, JD, it's super, super foundational because a lot of our other connecting practices are going to build on top of it. So we talked last time about being curious. We've got to be mindful, and balancing nurture and structure is just as important. And all it really means is that we're setting the right limits while supporting the kids' physical and emotional needs. So when we give the right amount of structure, that tells the kid their boundaries, their limits, what they can do, how far they can go, and where they can't. And that helps support their growth. And then when we provide the right amount of nurture, that is going to be that compassion, that care, that connection that they need in order to trust other people. And we need both for secure attachment. So we've got 3 core components, which is use nurture to cultivate trust. And that's the foundation of every relationship. Use structure to cultivate growth, which is what we all want for the kids that we are parenting or coaching or teaching or just loving on. And then in order to do both of those things, our 3rd core component is one of my favorites, which is use routines and rituals. So when we can set up up their world with the right routines and the right rituals for connection, it can really help do both of those things. Another really, really crucial part of balancing nurture and structure is that we're here to advocate for high nurture and high structure. So we're not trying to lower them, but we're trying to raise them to meet the other. So if you've got a season of life where, man, this kid is needing a whole lot of structure for whatever reason, that's great. Keep providing that structure and then just bring that nurture right on up to meet that high level.
Yeah, I think about this, especially through the lens of caring for kids who have some different sensory needs, right? And so like we've been down that path, and anything about our occupational therapist the other day just suggested using lists. Like, hey, maybe one thing we can do to build some structure in and wrap nurture in it is establish some lists, and in those lists, it's a task or two, and then there's a play, you know, kind of treat dangled out, so to speak, like, where, hey, like, we're going to take care of these two things first, then we're going to play, and we're going to play in your room, and you can let us know whatever you want to do. And like, then we're going to do that, and we're going to move on into other things. Then, you know, mom or dad's going to do some work for a little bit, and so we're going to do that, and you're going to play on your own while we work. And you know, a lot of these things are not rocket science, right? Like if we think about them enough on the front end, they're things that we can kind of figure out if we know our kids. But the thing that's given for us is just freedom. Like this kid in particular just responds great to that. And so we know now, like, hey, here's a way that we can help put structure in place. And is it going to work perfectly? No, because like the person is a person. And so like sometimes it's going to be amazing. Sometimes it's going to be terrible. But you know, what we're talking about is like in the realm of knowing our kids, meeting the balance of nurture and structure at an equal level so that they have predictability, right? And Jesse, I think of, you know, not to put you on the spot, but I do think of you as being somebody who does this really well. And while, especially talking about kind of routines and all that, rituals, do you want to kind of speak to kind of, we're heading into summer at the time we're recording this. And so do you want to share some of the summer kind of routines that you guys have to help build predictability?
Sure. I love that you said this new kind of way of providing structure for your kiddo has provided freedom.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times we can really get kind of bogged down, especially if we grew up in a really permissive home or if we tend to be a little more permissive in our parenting style. We tend to think of like, oh, that's going to chain me to these structure, you know, of routines or rituals, but truly it allows your child to feel safe.
Yeah.
It allows your child to know that there are limits, which our kids need to know, right? Yeah. That limits aren't a bad thing, that they give us freedom in many ways. So going into summer, I mean, this has looked different at different developmental ages for our own kiddos in our home. Yeah. When my kids were young, we would kind of do a lot of things that involved pictures. So even putting sticky notes up for like morning, afternoon, evening, and with a picture on it of like what we would do. Yeah. I'm a big fan of like kind of a rhythm of a week. It's almost like when we talk about rituals of like the ways that our families interact and the rhythm of our family, and the ways that we even love each other in those rituals, or like that they represent closeness and love in our family. Summertime, we've kind of gone through different rituals where maybe on Wednesdays we go to the library. And when I take my kid to the library, we always go to the little cafe next door and we have our tomato soup and our chicken salad. I mean, we have girls, so that's very girly lunch. But they know, you know, oh, I can't wait to go to the library and to our little lunch spot. And maybe on another day we're going to do a movie. And so we're all going to come up with a list of movies we want to watch for the summer. And then what the freedom that a structure provides for me is just the ability to kind of plug and play. Because I can get really overwhelmed with like, oh my goodness, we've got 10 whole weeks of like full-time childcare ahead of me.
Right.
And, you know, especially if they've been in school during the school year. So just to give my mind a little bit of space to be like, okay, y'all, let's come up with, 8 movies we want to watch this summer. Let's talk about 8 adventures we want to go on. And then I just plug them into our calendar.
Right.
And everyone's got stuff to look forward to.
Yeah, that's so good.
I love that you're talking about, even when you're talking about structure, you're talking about nurture at the same time. Absolutely. And so I think people sometimes want to like, internally we want to like pick one, and you can't just pick one for it to work. And so I just love that every example you gave of structure was also so nurturing at the same time. And I love just the idea of giving kids like a heads up, like they need to know what to expect. And I think we all have our own personalities. And so you guys know this, way more like structured and lists and what are we doing and what's happening. Yeah. And I married someone who is very much fly by the seat of their pants. Hey, it's a beautiful Saturday, and like a list of 8 things they want to do. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if we can do all that in one day. Do we have time? And so I think there's the like, let's see where the day takes us mindset. And then there's the like, let's plan every minute mindset. And when we can find that middle ground, like you just said, let's plan a fun adventure, but it can be any of the 8 that we picked. Like, I just love that like balance of flexibility. Hey, we were going to go to the zoo today, but it's raining. Like, kids have to be able to know sometimes our plans change. Mm-hmm. So we can't be so stuck to our schedule that we don't allow ourselves to respond to what's going on in front of us. But at the same time, it does give us something to look forward to. So it's like, my husband is a teacher. His last day of school is Friday, and I don't know what we're going to do Friday, but we've planned we're going to celebrate the end of school. So again, it meets my need for like, okay, I need to know what we're doing, but it meets his need for, he wants to wake up on Friday, enjoy his last day of school, and then figure out what we're going to do. So you can kind of do both. I know that's marriage, not the same as parenting, but similar with our kids, we can build in these kind of rhythms, and it can feel very responsive to the kid in front of us. Like if we've got a kid who loves being outside, we can go, okay, I'm going to tell myself that on Saturday, we're going to spend the morning outside, but I'm going to let them pick how. Like, hey, would you rather go to the park, or would you rather go to the river, or would you rather go to the zoo? Like you can let them kind of pick. And so I just love that. And I think whatever your personality is, so for me, because I'm so structured, I have to focus on upping, okay, but I can up my nurture in this way. And then I think for other folks that are more, or I guess it's not really structure nurture. In my case, it's more like routine versus flexible. Like that's where I get stuck. Because with kids, I'm so nurturing. I have to up my structure. So again, we're not like one-dimensional people, but we just have to focus on the balance and like paying attention. Where are our strengths? What are we really good at? And don't lose that. Just add the other piece in with it.
So before we go back into parenting, I think one super important thing, and this, we don't plan this. Like we don't plan to like pinpoint these moments of like self-reflection every week, but it just kind of naturally comes up. It is so important for us to balance that nurture and structure within our own selves, right? Yeah. Because if we're going to our people in relationship trying to offer ourselves as half people because we're so depleted from whatever, from the week or the, just life, it doesn't work. And so I think the idea that, my wife and I specifically kind of had this epiphany about probably like, I don't know, a year or so ago, where we were like, in lockdown, we were in the house just so painfully much we were there. And I'm a huge extrovert. I don't like to be cooped up. And I started realizing like my irritability, her irritability, like we needed space to exercise regularly. Like that was one thing we could predictably do that would help to alleviate some of this stress and build some structure into our own lives. And even just like physiologically, like reset every morning. So we just decided we're not going to feel bad about like on Saturday mornings, I'd take a long run or bike ride. Like I go make that happen. She's happy to accommodate that. Other mornings of the week, she's out doing stuff, or like she might choose in the afternoon, like, hey, if you want to take your body, like I'm going to go get on the bike for a little bit, or I'm going to go do a workout, whatever. And so we ebb and flow that and like make that space for each other, because we know like we're worthless if we don't have that. Right. So the answer is not, I'm not saying like go join a gym tonight or whatever. What I'm saying though is like recognize within yourselves, like what are the elements of structure that you need and the elements of nurture that you need to be cared for and well as a person, and make space for that for yourself, because you need to be able to offer that to your kids as well. And if you're not modeling it, like if you're running on an empty tank, like modeling for them that you're trying to help them get what they need, they're going to spot that, because kids have great BS sensors, like they have great sensors for like, yeah, right, you ain't even doing this. Like, why are you telling me to do this? And so, and if you don't have a preteen yet, you will hear that at some point from a preteen. But like, that's been really helpful for us. why don't we think about this for people who tend to go toward nurture and hand raise? Like I tend to be more permissive. I tend to be more like, whatever, we're fine. How do we begin to, what are some ways we can think through building some structure in where we are going to, like you talked about, Jesse, not miss that ability to be spontaneous or whatever? I
think it can be helpful to even just rebrand it in your mind. I'm a huge fan of rebranding. We do that in our house a lot. You know, if nap time isn't very popular, call it something different, you guys.
Yes.
Just put a different spin on it. But I think even just hearing you talk about the need for exercise, like structure provides freedom, structure meets our needs. Yeah. And so I like to think about it, you know, when you think about music, some people really love like very structured music. Maybe they prefer classical music and it's very, very structured. Some people love improv, jazz, and it's like, oh no, I want to just go with the flow. And I think of these kind of spectrum of personalities like music, but in every piece of music, you have a rhythm, you have a beat. Yeah. Even in improv music, you've got someone keeping a beat.
That's right.
And so I would encourage our kind of high nurture people that are looking to up their structure to think of it like, what is the rhythm that I can provide in the undercurrent of this day? Whether it means providing in advance, like the general flow of the day, like, and it doesn't have to be hour by hour or half hour by half hour. It could be like in the morning, we're going to do this. In the afternoon, you're on your own. In the evening, we're going to do this, you know, or like first part of the day, last part of the day. Yeah. But like, how could you maybe just put just a little bit of that beat behind your improv day? That's good. I think also we can tend to think that, you know, we're popular in ETC for saying that a lot of times nurture represents our yeses and structure represents our nos, which can give our high nurture friends a lot of validation because they're like, yes, we're the fun parents. But nurture isn't just fun. It's connection, and it requires intentionality, not just doing whatever feels good, you know? And so even with our high nurture, making sure that we're fully present, that we're connecting emotionally with our kids, not just letting them do whatever they want and having lots of fun. Yeah. So that would be my advice for our high nurture structure seeking friends.
I think too, man, I love how you just said, I love how you were just talking about the way that we can reframe it in our minds, because I think we get stuck a lot of times with the words and the word choices. And so we hear something like structure and we're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to do, but it's not, we can broaden our perspective. So I think like for the high nurture folks, looking for what, and looking at your kids as individual people, what do they need? Some kids need hour by hour. Some kids need a hour by hour with a couple of reminders in the middle. And if you start to pay attention, you'll get to know, oh, this kid does better when I really, really tell them several times what's about to happen. Or this kid is super good with the flow and he likes to go with the flow with me. But I can still provide nurture, just like you said, Jesse, by being like, hey, this is our order for the day, to help them kind of know the flow for your whole family, because it's not just about one kid. So I think, too, it's so individual when we think about what our kids need and finding ways to meet those needs over time. You just got to know them. And a lot of times, I mean, we talk about this so much, you have to try things and be willing for them to fail. So you got to be willing to like give something a try. You know, if you're not structured, you're like, oh my goodness, a sticky note sounds so stressful. I love sticky notes. But if it sounds so stressful to you, start by exactly what Jesse just said. Hey, in the morning, we're going to do this, afternoon, this, evening, this, and just start with a verbal and see how that goes. And if your kid does really well with it, maybe move to the visual and then add more. But you don't have to like go from, I'm so go with the flow, I don't have a plan ever, to like, a Becca McKay, I have a calendar with a planner that alerts me, hey, it's time for this. You don't have to be me. You just have to find ways to up that a little bit over time. And you've got to try stuff and be like, oh, that didn't work. We're not going to try that again. Or, oh man, that just made my kids spiral. That obviously wasn't providing what they needed in that moment.
I think a lot of times we can pigeonhole structure into schedules. And so even if you're struggling with that, like, what if you just picked a ritual? And I bet you have some rituals that you don't even notice. Like, do you guys I mean, we watch a show together on Sunday nights and eat popcorn every Sunday. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like we were like, now we are going to do this. Right. It is part of our structure. Right. It's just kind of something our family enjoys doing. And my kids, like, it's wired and fired together every Sunday night. They know we're doing that. So maybe just pick something, that's going to be a new tradition or ritual in your family that's super high nurture. So it's an easy way to introduce structure, or maybe pick a lagging skill, like, oh man, my kid really needs to work on X, Y, or Z. Yeah. And then maybe think about like, okay, how could I scaffold that skill? Because that's structure too. Think through like, okay, what's something I think would be fun for my kid to learn this summer? And what are a couple of steps that on the way to learning that thing?
So the other side of the structure is obviously like holding ground, right? So setting limits, holding ground, giving accountability, like teaching responsibility, all that stuff. So I think, and again, for the permissive ones of us, like we began thinking about this and we thought we had gotten off easy this first part of the structure conversations. We're like, oh, schedules, that's great. I just don't want to have to tell my kid no, So when we're thinking about the keeping rules side of this, I feel like it has to be tethered pretty tightly to the nurture, because those of us who do love holding rules and keeping rules in place and like having structure and order established from a discipline standpoint or behavioral standpoint, we're the ones that need nurture a lot in that. So when we think about that, like how do those two go together? Like the structure of, schedules and predictability and routines and rituals versus like setting and holding limits and all of that. Like how do those two things kind of go together, Jesse, in your mind?
I mean, I just think of one word, which is together. To me, that's what high nurture means when you have high structure, is that when you're imposing those limits, when you're having to say no, when you're dealing with disappointment, that you're dealing with it together. That's so high nurture, that you're connecting with the heart of your kid emotionally. I was talking to someone recently who was thinking about structure in a way that it was like, oh, it just means chore charts. And I was like, well, not necessarily. I mean, it's kind of limits. And the person was like, well, I just hate disappointing my kids. And I think being able, and again, that's like starts with us, right? Like, how do we deal with other people's disappointment and negative feelings? Like being able to be present in that and connect with our kids in the midst of that. To me, that's high nurture in the midst of a high structure, setting limits.
Yeah. I think, man, something that we were just talking about, I think last week with some folks, Jesse, was this idea of like, sometimes it's hard as parents or adults who are having to impose limits because you're trying to do it the right way. And sometimes in your mind, the right way means my kid will be happy about it. And I think just reframing that for ourselves of like, we can set loving limits. We can do them with so much care and compassion and reminders and heads ups and just thoughtfulness. We can be proactive instead of responsive. And even when we do all that, the kid might still cry because they still want to do the thing that they want to do. So I think letting ourselves really think about what does it mean to set the right kind of limit and sticking with that even when it's hard for our kids to accept versus, and I think the flip side of that is some people are like, well, sorry that you're disappointed. I don't care. Right. Keep it moving. And so I think there's two sides of that. And I think we can find, as we've said this so many times in this podcast, we can find the balance. We can find the middle ground. And it's going to take work. But setting an appropriate limit doesn't hinge on if my kid's happy about it or not.
Yeah. And that's not what high nurture means. Making our kids happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, think about this. Like, I love ice cream. I love it. And
Amen.
Like when the pandemic started and we were relegated to our homes and I could it was all Zoom, all work from home. And I only had to get up about 45 seconds before I started work. Now that was not reality. We had kids, but like I only had to look presentable about 30 seconds before we started work. I mean, I found myself up super late every night because number one, I was like, as soon as I go to bed, I'm basically like, having to be at work again. So I just don't want to go to bed. I'll stay up as long as I can because I don't want to have to like be at work again the next day, that's probably it. Like those of you who are counselors listening are like, I'd like to work with you, please. I've been through counseling. We're fine. But on the back end of that, like every night I find myself like, starting my episode of The Wire or watching whatever it was that I was on. And I'd be like, oh man, we got ice cream in the fridge. And I'll go and start pounding ice cream. Well, 3 months of that will show up and I begin just feeling sluggish throughout the day. I felt terrible, just physically in my body and like just about myself and all that. And I started thinking like, man, what's going on? Oh, you've been pounding ice cream every night for like 3 months. It was terrible for me. And it put me in a bad spot. Now, I did not like having to cut ice cream back out, but I had to because it was going to ruin my life. It just was going to ruin my health. And I think, just this morning, the baby in the house was like, throwing a fit because she couldn't have a popsicle for breakfast. And I have no problem setting that limit, right? Because I know, okay, we start doing popsicles for breakfast every morning, or we start, when there's an every morning sugary routine, everything falls apart, right? So what we got to do is be able to balance that. And so we say, hey, happy for you to have a popsicle. Let's put it in a special place and write your name on it. But we're going to wait till after lunch so that you can enjoy it the most or whatever. And we just give the limits. Well, of course, the kid's not happy with that.
Right.
That's fine, right? Yeah. If we have dessert and everybody's wanting more, there are some nights, heck yeah, go get seconds, more desserts. This is awesome. Well, we don't have dessert every night because we got to set some healthy limits on our kids and teach them moderation so that they're able to incorporate that into other areas of their lives. And so the food thing is a real clear picture of that. But I would say the other thing to remember is if you've ever had to leave a super fun party or a theme park or whatever, no one ever willingly wants to do that until it's flipped and it's way too late, right? And you just got to remember that we are there to set those limits. You talk about loving limits. It is loving our kids to set those limits. And I have to remind myself of that too, to be able to say hey, you're going to hate this in the moment. It's what your body actually needs. And I'm responsible for taking care of you. So I got to set that limit, even if you don't want that limit to be set.
And you can communicate that in such a loving way
Yes.
or such a punitive, harsh way.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's really on us as the adult to be so intentional about how we're communicating it. We're not, we don't have to apologize for setting limits. We don't have to go to the edge of oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I know we can't. And we don't have to go in that spiral. And we don't have to go into you better listen to me right now. We don't have to go to that spiral either.
What you get. Yep.
Yeah, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. How many of us grew up hearing that phrase? And
have said it.
Or have said it.
Yes,
Or feel that way. Or really want, we talked about, we've talked about a lot, we really want our kids to just kind of move on. Just move on. Okay, the ice cream will be there tomorrow. Just move on. And I think recognizing that for kids, what's happening in this present moment is what they can think about for a lot of kids.
Yep.
And that's just where they are. So being high nurture doesn't mean saying, okay, because this is all you can think about, yes, you can have more ice cream. It's no, you can't. But also, I'm not mad at you for being sad. Man, I know that's really disappointing. I know you really wanted some more ice cream.
Yeah.
I get that. Mm-hmm. I'm sad when I don't get what I want. How many times as adults do we throw our own version of tantrums when we don't get what we want? We do it. It's just different things. And for our kids, it's those day-to-day little things. So communicating the loving limit is so important. And again, even if our kid responds, quote unquote, the same way, even if there's still tears, it still matters. The way that we communicate matters because you still remember, I can remember the teachers I had in different grades in school. I won't call them out. And I remember which teachers were very, strict but kind versus the ones who were strict and mean.
Yeah.
You remember how those limits are communicated over time.
And shout out to the parents who, I just want to validate you if you're parenting toddlers and preschoolers or teenagers
Yes.
who are feeling big feelings of disappointment all day long. There are certain developmental stages that really, really struggle, or personalities that struggle with limits and with disappointment. And that feeling of disappointment just feels so enveloping and crushing.
Yeah.
And like you all are saying, I just think that having a high level of structure with a high level of nurture means that we can hold that limit, we can enforce that limit while being together with the child in those feelings.
Yeah.
And not dismissing them, not feeling that way ourselves, but just being with them.
Yeah.
And that togetherness, just to reiterate again, does not mean Family Matters or what am I thinking of on TGIF growing up? Like, I'm dating myself so much right now, but like the Full House moments of like, you know, where the soft music starts playing at the end of the episode and they resolve everything. Sure. And it's like, I love you, Dad. I love you too, DJ. Like, and them like, you know, reconciling that way. A lot of times it ends with like, well, I don't want it, whatever. And it's like, okay, well, listen, I love you and I know you're disappointed. And if that's all you got to say, I'll give you some space, you know, like, and sometimes you're going to leave and they're still disappointed and that's hard. But, you know, you have to remember, like, we got to think beyond this moment. Am I setting a correct limit? Am I teaching them a right principle here? Like, and then just know, like, it's going to bear fruit down the road.
What we're not going to see from our kids, but what does exist is that when we do set limits for our kids, they feel safe and they respect us for that. They know that they can trust us to be in charge.
Right.
If we're all willy-nilly giving into them all the time, whether they're toddlers or whether they're teenagers, there's something intuitive within them that thinks, I can't trust this person to keep me safe.
Yes.
And it's not like my 12-year-old's going to be like, thank you so much for not letting me do that with my friend's mother.
Right.
I feel so much safer. She's going to express it as disappointment.
Yeah.
But deep down, that is kind of an undercurrent within that.
And can I say one more thing? Man, when you're talking about teenagers, I'm just thinking about like a common limit that a lot of parents have to wrestle with as kids get older is technology.
Right.
And I think, you know, you can do that in such a, you can do it in such a way that leads to disconnection and frustration and anger and resentment. If you do it as like I'm going to give you this with no boundaries, but as soon as you mess up, I'm snatching it back for 2 months. Like, I think that's common is like, let's just see how they do. And I think when we can set limits from the beginning that are appropriate for their age and development and your family and your context, and like, are they riding the bus by themselves and they need to communicate with you? Or are you together in the car and could you ask them to not have it when you're, you know what I mean? Like, every family is going to look different, but communicating those limits on the front end. And then on the back end, whenever the kid sneaks the phone, stays up all night, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. You can respond by taking the phone away, and you can do that punitively, or you can do that with a loving limit. Punitively, snatch it up. No explanation. You ruined your chance. You're obviously not ready for this responsibility. Therefore, it's gone. Or really problem solving with the kid. Hey, what was going on? Were you just really excited about getting to the next level? Was it just like really hard to stop doing it? Or were you really nervous about something and you were trying to distract yourself? Or were you in a really fun conversation with your friends and you just couldn't stop? Like, there is a reason that kids do what they do, and they don't always know the why. And so it's not like you're standing over them, why did you do it? But if you can really get in a posture of like, hey, what was going on? And this is going to be the limit next time. And this is how we're going to handle it. Right. But let's figure out together what that was. Like, that's a different posture.
And I think, you know, even within that realm of technology, and this really could probably be a whole separate 3 or 4 episodes. But one thing that that I'm so grateful for the advice we were given in this, but it's to make it very clear from the beginning that it's transparent. Like, what the technology is being used for is transparent. So like, let them know from the front end, like, hey, just so you know, I'm able to see what websites you visit or what apps you use and how long you've been using them, all that. I just want you to know, like, as your caregiver, I'm just going to check just to keep you safe. There's stuff that you're not aware about that can be really dangerous. There's stuff that I might not be aware about. And so we're just going to keep on the same page. And every now and then I'm going to read your conversations in text, not because I don't value your privacy, but because I so value you and your security and your safety and all of that. And I want you to make sure that, I want you to know also that we're seeing that too, just so that we're all on the same page. Like, and that, and there might be people who are screaming at at their phone right now, be like, heck no, I'm not doing that. That's invasion of privacy, whatever. That's what we've chosen to do in our house. And what the level of safety that has provided is that there's no, like, it eliminates the desire for hiding, because like the phone's charged in our room in our case, a watch, whatever, it's charged every night in our room. We can look at everything in that moment and see. And so, like, sometimes we do it with them and go through and check stuff together. And that provides a level of freedom, and it takes away the opportunity to run and hide all the time in a negative way.
I think, y'all are so right. This is so individual to each family, right? And the way we each use technology and discuss it and talk about it in our families. But y'all know that I'm high structure. So just an idea for anyone with younger kids thinking about like, oh, I really dread those years. That was me. I thought, I just was seeing so many friends that I love, like, hand phones over, immediately take them back. I thought there's got to be a better way. Like, am I doomed to this when my kid becomes a teenager? And, the age your kid is when you give them their own piece of technology varies between families.
Right.
But I started looking at my 8, 9, 10-year-old thinking, okay, I want to scaffold the skill of using technology. And so even applying high nurture, high structure to something like that, of like, how can I teach my kid how to do this thing that I'm going to release them to do with less supervision when they're older?
Yep.
And how can I start laying the ground for that as they are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12?
Right.
And it's provided a lot of really interesting conversations to talk about, like, we have, in case you're just curious for an idea, we have a family cell phone that stays in our kitchen and our living room, kind of like the way that the wired phones used to exist in our families growing up, if you're old like me. But anyways, we too can, anybody in the family can read anything on the phone because it belongs to all of us.
Right.
And we've had a lot of good conversations about like what people are talking about on the 6th grade group chat, or, just like anything that's coming up. Like, oh, I noticed this. Like, what do you think about that?
And within proper limits, like it can be really freeing and fun for the kids. And then if they don't have to worry about keeping stuff secret because mom and dad are in the loop, and mom and dad are not freaking out when they see stuff, that you can have conversations and ask questions and communicate that we're all on the same page. It just protects everybody involved. And I think it's great. So again, maybe we'll do a whole separate series or episode on that later.
Let me say this. I think to bring up technology in the conversation about structure and nurture is because a lot of times as parents, because technology is so driving for kids, it's the first thing we go to when they need any kind of limit. So you're arguing with your friends at soccer practice and the coach says you're being disrespectful. Oh, you're going to lose your phone. So I think just like something that we want to say at ETC as we balance structure and nurture is that we want to think about our limits appropriately. Like if our kid is struggling with a specific activity, soccer practice, piano practice, whatever the case may be, we need to like stop and think about that activity. What's the structure and nurture that they need to be successful in that environment? And, or do they need a break from this environment for this season or for a time until XYZ happens? Like, I think just like give yourself permission to be more creative than you think you can be, to be more flexible than you think you can be, and to really think about each individual environment that your kid is in terms of, do they have the right structure they need? Do they have the right nurture they need? And if they have really high structure, how can I up my nurture to help them? If they're constantly arguing with coach on the soccer field, do we need to problem solve at home and practice? How do I handle my coach telling me what to do versus jumping to technology as that quick, easy consequence? And thinking about them as a whole kid, and they need so many skills. They need so much. And so I just think, give yourself permission to think about your whole kid and don't just get stuck with that one easy reactionary thing.
Along those lines, we think about when it comes to high nurture, there's lots of connotation, lots of fear amongst high structure people. And I think, we could go in a lot of different directions. One thing I'd love for us to talk about before we close out is just the idea that we throw out in the homework here, and even in the last movie, or last year, Netflix had the Jennifer Garner movie, the Yes Day movie, based on the book. And so I want to talk about kind of the principle that we employ Yes Day for, like why we do that and kind of what we do when we do this. So this might be, if you're a high structure person, this might be something for you to tack onto your summer list, gear up, get yourself ready for it. Maybe set a lot of high structure right before this. But like one of the things that we do suggest for parents as they're learning to set high limits of nurture for themselves and their kids is to take a day and communicate with the kids ahead of time, or not, but give as many yeses as you possibly can. So to have a day where you give a yes in every possible situation throughout the course of the day. And Becca, I'll start with like, why do we end up doing that? What is the benefit of that? Like, what do we see as a result?
Man, as always, it starts with us, right? So if you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to say yes to this kid as much as I can today, it really shows you a lot about your gut reactions, about your knee-jerk reactions. It shows you what are the things that my gut says no to, because I think we can kind of trick ourselves and go, well, it's for their safety and their health. And then a lot of times it's just for our convenience. Right. So it kind of highlights, oh, okay, that could be a yes. It just is going to take me more time. Right. Or that could be a yes. It's just not my personal preference. And so it kind of reveals those things to us. And then for the kid, you know, we deal with parents who have kids of all different, you know, all across the spectrum of comfort with asking for things. Some kids are going to bombard you with 1,001 things, and they're going to catch on. Oh, they're saying yes to everything. I'm going to ask for more. Other kids have a really hard time using their voice. So you're going to notice with those kids, man, they didn't ask me for a single thing. That tells me something about how they're feeling. That tells me something about how they feel about themselves and what they are believing about their voice. So the concept of voice or like self-agency is really important when we're thinking about helping kids to grow. So Yes Day shows us about ourselves, shows us about our kids, and it can just be a lot of fun. If you can roll with it, if you can be creative, and those fun connecting moments, like when you guys with your tweens are thinking back to those early years, those early Yes Days are some of the things that your kids remember. Like it's some of those fun memories, those, man, wasn't it silly that we did put on our Halloween costumes in June and go to the grocery store? Like, wasn't that hilarious? Or again, you know, maybe that's not the direction that your kids are going to take it. Maybe it's going to be so much different than what you thought. So it just opens up possibility. It's a good exercise. You know, we do encourage parents, like it doesn't mean you have to buy everything that your kids ask you to buy. We understand financial resources are not unlimited, and it doesn't mean you have to say yes to things that are not safe. You know, there's a way to take it too far. But it does give you that pause. It gives you a pause. If you tell yourself, and especially if you're parenting with another person, man, tell them too, because you can hold each other to it. And so when your kid asks you first thing in the morning, can we do this, that, and the other? When your gut reaction is, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Like it holds you accountable to, okay, this is Yes Day. Like, here we go. And you can be so creative and just enjoy that day with your kids. So it's a good thing to do if you're starting on this journey and you're like, I don't even know how to provide nurture. It's a good starting point for that, to just highlight some of those opportunities. And then it's a good thing to come back to if you're in a season where like things are just tough, things aren't going great, you're having a hard time. It can be like a really helpful, hey, let's plan a Yes Day. Like I think this kid needs to feel that yes. They need to feel that freedom. We're having to be really high structure because of these reasons. Let's give them some opportunities to feel like, whew, I got a yes from mom, and I didn't think I was going to. Yeah. What do you think, Jess?
Well, first, as a high structure person participating in this discussion, these have been so helpful for me. And the first one we did was a failure, and kind of a famous story we tell in our trainings, because we set structure aside that day that we were being high nurture, and our kid could not handle it. I mean, she didn't feel safe. She was like, what is happening with these adults? What is going on? Yeah. And so I would encourage you guys, you want to keep your level of structure in place as you're saying yes. But what I'm really thinking about is what Yes Days have taught me in practicing nurture by saying yes is my posture and my mindset. And when I say posture, I mean like my orientation towards that child. You were talking about when things are tough and things are, maybe we're having to implement a lot of structure with a child, or a child just requires that. That's what I'm thinking of in terms of like, when you feel disconnected from a kid. I mean, it might be a tough season. It might be a tough day, but it's like, you've got that feeling, and your kid probably has that feeling where y'all don't want to be around each other. Yeah. Things are just feeling hard in that connection. And I think being able to say yes is not just yes to what you want. Yes, you can be in control. Yes, I'm going to share this power, but it's yeah, like I see you, I hear you, I am orienting myself toward you. And to me, that is true nurture. Is that like, we like to say, not just yes to the things, but yes to yourself.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be the bigger, kinder, stronger person here and open myself up to you when I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
And it creates a change in your relationship with your child. And you can get back to this kind of state of connection. So I really love that about yes days and being able to say yes.
Awesome. Well, guys, before we wrap up today, any last words on this or any other thoughts you have that you want to leave people with before we head out?
All right. I'll just say, I think a lot of people think of balancing nurture and structure as a seesaw. And I would encourage you to think about it like JD's soundboard over here, that we're just maxing out both. I don't think that we have to lower one in order to increase the other. And if you know that you're high structure like I am, it's not like I need to pull that down to meet my level of nurture. I need to pull my nurture up to meet and
that's right.
There might be times when I need to raise my structure.
Yep.
So max them out, guys. Just, I think our kids always benefit from having a high level of both, but you need both.
Yeah. I just encourage people to start with you. We're going to say that probably every week, but just start with you. What do you need? Do you have enough structure for your day? Do you have enough nurture? And if not, how can you get support first? We started the podcast talking about that. So I think just ending on that note of, man, if you're having a hard time and you're like, I don't know how to do this and I'm tired, you're tired for a reason. So what's the structure and nurture that you need to be able to then offer yourself to your kids in that way? So I just think it always starts with being introspective, and then we can think about our kids and our family.
Jesse Faris, Becca McKay, thank y'all, and we'll see you next week. Well, hopefully there were some practical takeaways for you in that episode. And yes, I know, obviously we talked some philosophically about just kind of the big picture of balancing nurture and structure, but I would say all of our hope is that you're walking away out of this episode today with some actual tools and things that you can use today in your own parenting. For the whole ETC team, for Becca McKay, for Jesse, who joined us today, for the Ottingers, for Kyle Wright, who edits and engineers all of our audio, and Tad Jewett, the creator of the music behind the Empowered to Connect podcast. I'm JD Wilson, and we will see you next week on the Empowered to Connect podcast.